Experience true liberty when we arrive at a place enough to tell the truth, safe enough to tell the truth. Our story, our testimony can be just what someone else needs to help them go on and to give them hope. Denise asked us to share about how we found our purpose in Christ. To do that, I'm going to take you a little bit back to the beginning. My mom had 7 children from 4 different fathers, and I am the baby of them. My dad left when I was a baby, and he was not part of my life. My mom struggled to make it, and she decided to put me in a foster home when I was 2. There I was loved and I was nurtured. My foster dad was a minister of the Methodist Church, so from a very young age, I was told about God's love for me. I stayed there for about 1.5 years. One thing that I remember so much as a child is we moved all the time. I think I moved 15 times by the time I was 18, and some of them were to different states. When I was in 6th grade, I found out about this place called Mooseheart, and at the time I lived in Pennsylvania and it was in Illinois. And I told my mom I wanted to go, and she made a way for me to go. It was an amazing experience. I did really well in school and I thrived there. But at the age of 15, I began a vicious cycle of eating and throwing up, trying to starve myself and do all kinds of crazy things to be thin. I wanted to be loved, and I thought being thin was the way to do it. I think when you begin a bad habit, you don't realize that it will begin to have such a hold over you, and you can't stop it as easily as you started it. Later that same year, now in the 10th grade, I moved to California to live with my sister Beth. I started doing drugs, and my eating disorder was out of control. I soon came home and I went into a treatment center for 30 days. But when I came out of it, I didn't have any accountability at home, and I quickly went back to my old habits. I was a CEO Christian throughout my young life. We went to church on Christmas, Easter, and other special occasions. God was not really talked about, but I had a sense of him. One day after high school and after a bad breakup, I was at the laundromat. Yes, I went to those. And there were some Christian girls from the college up the street, and I began to talk to them, and they told me about Jesus that day, and they asked me if I wanted to ask Jesus into my heart. And I politely said no, because I was very prideful. But later that day, I prayed that prayer. I asked God to come into my life and help me with my eating disorder and give me some direction in my life. I didn't have a church to go to, but I knew that something had changed in my heart. The following year, I decided to come back to California for the summer. This time, I bought the ticket. It was June 1990. The weather was amazing. I got a job as a waitress right away and a fake ID. I remember one night getting ready to go to the club, and I felt God tell me in my heart that this isn't the life that he had planned for me. But I didn't know what to do with that because I didn't attend church. I knew my life was out of control, so I decided to take my customers up on an offer that they kept extending to me to go to their church. I went to the church and I loved it. I loved the music, I loved the sermons, I felt at home. I began helping out at Awanas and going to Bible study, and I started living my life for God. 2 years later, I was introduced to my husband, Frank. He showed me love and attention, and I loved coming to church here with him. I loved his family. I was really excited about the future. We were married 1 year later. Right away, I got involved in ministry. Pastor Larry asked us to have Bible study at our house, and I loved it. I loved being hospitable to people. We soon started having our own children. Frank had a son that lived with us. He was 8. And having a stepson was way harder than I thought. I began to dive back into my old patterns of thinking, not looking to God, but to myself and how to make it better. After the birth of my first son, Jesse, I wanted to be a good mom. I began to realize that I needed to be healthy and stop focusing so much on being thin. Before long, we had 4 boys. The pressures of life were real, and it was no longer fun. I wanted a way out, but you can't do that when you have 4 kids and you're married and you're a Christian. Meanwhile, we started our own business, which at first I just got to flirt with. I didn't have to work full-time in the office as I was taking care of our boys. This was a huge source of contention between Frank and me. It revealed all the character flaws that each of us had, and I didn't like it at all. I began to find ways to escape. And one of those ways that I did that is when I started talking to men online. I was looking for someone to validate me, to make me feel special, instead of looking to God and what His Word says about me. I took that too far, and I began a relationship outside of my marriage. I knew what I was doing was so wrong and so out of God's will, but like my eating disorder, it now had its hold over me, and I no longer was listening to that still small voice. Our business had suffered a lot, and we had let all of our employees go. Now it was me in the office and Frank in the field. We argued all the time. I did not like him. Frank and I began to go to a marriage group. We had been to so many, nothing ever changed. But this time I began to see God change my husband's heart, and I never thought that could happen. His heart was softening, and he wasn't as angry with me when I made mistakes. But I had been living this lie, and the fear of telling him outweighed the goodness that God was doing. When you let the enemy of your soul fill you with lies, you become a slave to them. You isolate yourself. You begin to align yourself with people who will agree with you rather than the ones that will tell you the truth. Out of fear, I left. I thought there was no way that I could be forgiven for what I had done. And where it took me was hell. I was alone. I knew that I had to come face to face with the choices that I made. I was ready to receive my punishment, face my reality. My choices caused so much wreckage. I was ashamed. I hurt my family in so many ways. I was ready for Frank to divorce me. I had been doing the bare minimum as a mom in our business. I had broken everyone's trust. I was only thinking of myself, and my pain outweighed my role as a wife, mom, and a business owner. But instead of condemnation, I was given forgiveness and grace, which turned into hope. Frank, through the grace of God, was able to forgive me and believe in our marriage. I began to feel safe with him leading me. I was able to really feel what it's like to receive God's forgiveness through him forgiving me. I was guilty, and I knew I didn't deserve to be forgiven, but God. Frank and I began counseling and began to work on our issues. We became friends again. He's now my best friend, and I really like him. One thing I knew I had to do that I had never done is embrace the business that God had given us and that Frank had started. I began to look at things differently. No longer was it something that I had to do, but it was something that I got to do. I could help Frank, and we could become a team. And that's what we've been doing for the last 7 years, building our family, our relationship with God, and our business. We still have struggles. We work together every day, but I no longer look for ways to escape. I look for ways to make things better. I own up to my shortcomings instead of blaming him, and I enjoy my job way more than I thought. I am so grateful for the people that believed in me, and I'm proud that my husband's leading me. I don't know if I would have ever chose this purpose for my life. I don't think we always get to do that. I think that we can decide to, right now, right where we're at, to embrace the good things that God has given us and ask him to help us see them as gifts that they are. And in doing so, we can make a difference in the everyday tasks and the choices that we make. I am so blessed, despite all the wrongs that I have done, that I can still be used for God's glory. Thank you, ladies, for letting me share.